Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening in that app, which is free to download and free to use, is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. Not a veritable cornucopia of sports topics because it's Broncos, and more Broncos. Maybe a little bit on the rest of the NFL and our reigning athlete of the week from Harrison High School, Dylan Arocho, will be my guest. And of course, you can help dictate the terms of engagement here by calling or texting into the show 719-24-7. 1313. I'll talk about what you want to talk about. But I will start with the Denver Broncos. And fight fans will understand this right away. And if you're not a fight fan, don't worry. I will explain what I am getting at here. Fight fans will know the name George St. Pierre, right? I would say that you can't even consider yourself a fight fan if you don't know who GSP is. One of the greats in UFC history. One thing that he was known for was being able to change his fighting style based on the opponent and the circumstances that happened throughout a fight. If he had his druthers, if he could go in and just draw it up the exact way he wants to win, he would be on his feet. He'd be boxing a little bit, trying to get an opening to where he could shoot in, take the opponent down, and wrestle, right? But that's the way every GSP fight would go if he had his way. But if the opponent wouldn't allow him to do that, he could alter it in different ways. The way that George St. Pierre wanted to fight was safe, smart, safe, bordering on boring at times. It wasn't as eye-popping as the ways that some UFC fighters chose to fight, but it was effective. And again, when circumstances called for it, he could adapt his style and his game plan, with the result being the same more often than not, which is him getting his hand raised. The Denver Broncos showed on Sunday that they have that ability. They don't want to play the way they did yesterday. They don't. Because if they did, we would see more performances like that throughout this season. There is a very specific way that Sean Payton wants his team to play. A formula, an algorithm, a blueprint, whatever you want to call it. There's a very specific way that Sean Payton wants his football team to play every Sunday. And it's been wildly effective. It's been at times safe. And it's been labeled at times boring. And it's, I think, rightly engendered a little bit of disbelief and doubt into the viability of the Denver Broncos as a Super Bowl team. Yet they keep winning. But every now and again, and Sunday was one of those days, they had to be more. They had to be more than what they had shown in most of their games this year if they wanted to beat the Packers. The circumstances dictated that they had to be more explosive offensively. And I told you on Friday, the team that was hit more explosive plays would win the game. Did I think that was going to be the Broncos? No, I thought it was going to be the Packers. But ultimately, the team that hit more explosive plays won the game, and that was the Denver Broncos. But yet, one of my big takeaways is it wasn't that the foundation of what the Broncos game plan was very similar to what game plan they have every week, right? They still ran the ball, 19 carries, 65 yards for RJ Harvey. Still relied on their defense, right? It wasn't this smothering, dominating defensive performance, but they needed them. They needed them a lot throughout that game. And it did end up being a one-score game, which is quite normal for the Denver Broncos. But on top, there was so much more layering on top of it. But at the foundation, it was still very much the same game plan that the Broncos have, because that's their identity. Right? Running the football, relying on the defense, Bo Nix not making mistakes. Yesterday followed that blueprint as well, but there was more that they added to their game. They adapted based on the circumstance, based on the opponent. They have been able a few times this season to morph themselves just enough into whatever they need to be in order to win that particular football game on Sunday, which is the definition of a good team, being able to win in different ways. 33 points against the Giants, 44 against the Cowboys. Even go back to the Colts game. I know they lost, but that was a more dynamic, more explosive, higher scoring Broncos team than you have seen through much of the season. And to me, that all starts with what Bo Nix is allowed to do or asked to do. For the most part, Bo Nix will do whatever Sean Payton wants him to do. Right? He's very good, and I think it's part of the reason why Sean Payton likes him so much. He will follow the game plan. He won't, go rogue. If Sean Payton wants him to be this, he will be that. If Sean Payton yesterday says, hey, I need you to be a little bit more, Bo Nix has shown the ability to do that. Now, a big debate that you and I have had throughout the season, it's kind of calmed down recently, but I imagine it's going to come up even as soon as today. The idea that Sean Payton is holding Bo Nix back. That's going to be reintroduced to the conversation this week, because you saw Bo Nix throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. But what I think it is Sean Payton knowing Bo Nix's limits on a consistent basis, and also what the circumstances of the game dictate. I don't think he's 300 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. I don't think he's Josh Allen, but he can cosplay as the guy every once in a while, whether it be a fourth quarter, whether it be a game. Bo Nix at times has looked to be one of the top 10 conservatively quarterbacks in the league. Sometime in those fourth quarters, that run that he had with all those fourth quarters, he looked like a top 5 quarterback in the league. But is he that consistently? Can he be this every single game? I don't think so, and I don't think Sean Payton thinks so. But what was kind of the impetus of fourth quarter Bo Nix? Broncos are trailing, and they just got to do whatever they can, pull out all the stops to make sure they win a football game. And yesterday was kind of that for 4 quarters. So what you can have confidence in is that Sean Payton knows what is necessary from his team to win a game. He has shown that even when they lose. He has shown that he will craft a game plan that will give the Broncos a chance to win. And what Bo Nix continues to do is to be able to execute that plan good enough to give the Broncos a chance to win every single week. And yesterday, what that was a more dynamic Broncos offense. That was a requirement. That's what they had to be in order to win the game. They don't have to be that every week. Right? They haven't had to be that most weeks. But now we have another instance, and perhaps the best instance, given the opponent, of, yeah, in a one-off, sure, the Broncos can do X, Y, and Z. But what kind of situation is a one-off? The postseason. What yesterday, I think one of the big takeaways is if the Broncos need, and I'm thinking of a potential matchup at some point with Buffalo, right? I think that's where we're going. I don't want to dismiss New England, but I've said that if New England has to come to Denver, I'm going to take Denver in that game. The one team that I have maintained for weeks now and will still maintain that I would probably take over the Denver Broncos right now in the AFC is Buffalo. But what I think would be required of the Denver Broncos in order to hang with and maybe beat Buffalo is what they showed yesterday. Call it another level offensively that the Denver Broncos can get to. It's not where, Buffalo stays there. Josh Allen stays there all the time. Patrick Mahomes stays there all the time. Lamar Jackson, most of the time, stays up there. I don't think Bo Nix can live in that world. I don't think that the Broncos offense can live in that world on a consistent week-to-week basis. I think Sean Payton knows that. But it is heartening if you're a Broncos fan to know that, hey, season on the line, which yesterday wasn't, but I think it has to give you confidence that if the season were to be on the line and Bo Nix and this offense needs to be more than this ground and pound, safe throws, short completions, rely on field position, that they can do that. Because that's what yesterday called for, and they were able to rise to the occasion. The point of these games, all of these games, is to win, right? Sean Payton has talked about the goals of this team. First, it's win the division. Then it's getting as much home field advantage as you can get, and then it's the Super Bowl. But in a lot of ways, you don't need to be what the Broncos were yesterday every single week to check those items off the to-do list. And what Sean Payton has found is a tried and true formula that will help them with that math. We keep plugging along like this, we'll get this many wins, and it will give us the first two items on the to-do list. But in order to check off that third box, there's going to come a time where they're going to have to be what they showed yesterday. Going back to the George St. Pierre example. George St. Pierre just wanted to win the fight. He wasn't in it to win the bonuses that Dana White would hand out on a nightly basis. He wasn't overly concerned with getting fans out of their feet 5 seconds in by trying a spinning heel kick or anything like that. He went into every fight looking to win the fight. And sometimes George St. Pierre would win a fight and people would call it ugly. Some people will call it boring. But it would get him to where he wanted to go. And then when a title was on the line, or when he was going up against the best in the UFC, and the circumstances dictated, I got to get a little bit out of this. That can still be my foundation, but I got to be more. I got to change it up a little bit in order to win this particular fight. He would do that time and time again, and that's why he's one of the greatest to ever do it. The Broncos have now shown, yes, most of the time they're going to be the team they were for the last month. Relatively lower scoring, rely on the defense, not winning any style points. But yesterday, because of the level of opponent they were facing, they had to be more. They had to morph a little bit, and they did. And it's why they're one of the best teams in the NFL. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Broncos win. One thing that I want to continue to reiterate, don't think for a second that was a game that the Broncos offense won, because they needed their defense time and time again. We'll talk about that next on Extra Sports 1300. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and we want to make it even better with $1,000 towards your winter wish list. You could use it for holiday shopping, travel, a holiday display, or to simply treat yourself. You can enter this national contest at extrasports1300.com for a chance to fulfill your winter wish list, sponsored by Level Up Falcon, weight loss, hormone therapy, and IVs. Level up your health. 34-26, Broncos win over the Green Bay Packers, 11 straight victories. But don't let the final score fool you. Because if the Broncos do not have one of the best defenses in the NFL, they are not going to win that game. And the defense is still a huge part of yesterday's story. Patrick Surtain's interception completely changed the momentum of that game. And what it reminded me of a little bit was the interception he had last year, the pick six against Vegas, because it wasn't just that it was a great play, which it was. Not a lot of guys can make that interception. But the thing about Pat Surtain's interceptions, especially last year when he won Defensive Player of the Year, was that they were consequential. They were clutch. They were momentum, and all interceptions are in part momentum changing. But think about the situation going into that. Packers had scored on every possession they had in that game. Everyone. Yeah, they were settling for some field goals, which has been kind of part of the Broncos defense's MO. Like, you may get close, but you're not going to get in the end zone. You're going to kick field goals. But they were winning that middle eight that we talk about, that Sean Payton is obsessed with, right? Last 4 minutes of the first half, first 4 minutes of the second half. That stretch can completely change football games. And here's Green Bay going into halftime, kicking a field goal, coming out of halftime, 3 plays, 70-plus yards, touchdown. And then the Packers defense forced the Broncos to punt. So that game was getting away from them. As much credit as you want to give the Broncos offense, and we'll talk about Bo Nix and all that kind of stuff, and that's all warranted, but the defense once again, I don't want to say bails them out, but just makes plays to help the Denver Broncos win the game, to help the offense do what they were able to do. So Pat Surtain makes the interception, touchdown for the Broncos on the ensuing drive, and they didn't look back from there, right? It just kept putting up points, and the defense kept the Packers off the board. Now, that pick against Vegas didn't just change that game early last year. It changed the whole Broncos season, right? This season it doesn't need to be saved. They don't need to turn around the season. They've done just fine to this point. But I think that game certainly needed flipped. And that's what Pat Surtain was able to deliver. And I think bigger picture, I don't think this is the season that Pat Surtain drew up as the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. Now, a lot of it's been out of his hands. You thought that teams weren't thrown his way before? Now he wins Defensive Player of the Year. And they have somebody on the other side in Riley Moss that they can pick on. So Surtain hasn't had a ton of opportunities. Plus, you throw in the injury that kept him out for 3 games. It just overall, not that it's been a bad season by Pat Surtain by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't, it certainly has not measured up to last year. And again, a lot of it's not his fault, and some of it is a byproduct of the season he had last year. Again, teams wanting to throw at him less this year. And then throw on top of all of that the fact that everyone's been so enamored with the Broncos' pass rush as the reason why they've been able to slow down teams rather than what they're doing on the back end. So Surtain hasn't been bad, but he just hasn't been at the level. He hasn't been as impactful in some ways as he was a season ago. But that made that interception yesterday even bigger. Because I think in some ways it reminded people, oh yeah, this dude is the best doing what he does, as Riley Moss would explain.
Yeah, this kid's a stud, absolute stud. Went up, played the ball great. You know, it was Pat Surtain, the old Pat Surtain. So it was great seeing it.
It was the old Pat Surtain. But let's not forget the Riley Moss redemption that happened in that game. And I'm not talking about him bouncing back after the pass interference, because that was not pass interference called on Riley Moss on that first drive of the third quarter. That was his reputation, unfortunately. And that's been part of this story. Now, I've been more critical of Riley Moss than others have, but I can acknowledge that there are times when Riley Moss is picked on, not just by other teams, but by the officials. And there are times that Riley Moss has done everything he can, including not interfere, and still passes are being completed over his head. So it's been a very trying season for Riley Moss. So for him to come up with his interception, which should have sealed that football game, you had to love that if you're a Broncos fan. It's been you want to talk about a season not going the way you would have hoped for Pat Surtain. How about for Riley Moss? Stepping into the role that he has, it's overall been a really rough go. And for him to come up with that interception at that moment in the game should have sealed it. The only reason it didn't was because Sean Payton was calling the game as if there were no consequences. Didn't it strike you how aggressive Sean Payton was at the end of that game? I mean, this is a Sean Payton who has been labeled as too conservative, doesn't let Bo Nix cook, doesn't want to be dynamic. It's a far cry from the offenses he had in New Orleans. All of this talk, the Broncos being one of the lower teams in the NFL when it comes to fourth down conversions. And it's not because they don't get them. It's because they don't try. Right? They count. If they're in field goal range, they're confident in Will Lutz. They want to play the field position game. I can't recall another time where the Broncos had a game in their back pocket. Riley Moss's interception should have finished that game. I do not recall a Broncos team in that same situation repeatedly going for it on fourth down. Now, I just got done in the previous segment giving credit to Sean Payton, and he deserves credit. Okay, there's a lot that happens in a football game. Some of it could be worthy of praise. Some of it could be worthy of criticism. And then you just add them all up at the end. And when you do that, Sean Payton's play calling was far more of a positive for the Denver Broncos than a negative. However, it seemed like, and what I pondered on X last night at Gingerly Tweets, I don't think he would be doing some of the things he did at the end of that game if the Patriots had beaten the Bills. But with Buffalo beating New England and the Broncos knowing that no matter what happened against Green Bay, they would still have the number 1 seed, I think that made Sean Payton say, you know what? I don't just want to ride this out like I have so many games. He wanted to go for the death blow. He didn't want the Packers offense to get the ball back. And normally he would trust his defense, and it wasn't a lack of trust in the defense, quite the opposite. Right? He trusted his defense to say, if this doesn't work, I still think they can get the stops they need, and they did. But it looked different because it was the offense trying to put the game away rather than the defense. And I feel like Sean Payton didn't just want to simply give the ball, punt the ball, try to pin the Packers deep and say, well, my defense is going to keep them from going 80 or 90 yards for a touchdown. He wanted to end it multiple times right then and there. The 4th down throw to Cortland Sutton, that worked. I don't think they would have called that in most of their games this season. Going forward on that last 4th down where Prentice was stopped, that didn't work out. Can't say that one's good and one's bad just because of the result. They both have the same mentality. And I think if you are critical of the Broncos going forward on 4th down when Prentice was stopped, I think you have to in some way be critical of them for going forward on 4th down to Cortland Sutton. But Sean Payton was coaching the end of that game like the Broncos had very little to lose. And that's not totally off because, again, if they lose to Green Bay, they would have still had the number 1 seed. But ultimately, that was a 1-score game. And ultimately, the Broncos defense swung the momentum of the game. And then they sealed the game, I think, 3 different times, starting with Riley Moss's interception. But then ultimately, the last time being that incomplete pass that Jordan Love threw at the end of that one. It was interesting to watch Sean Payton coach because I think it's so counter to what he has been for most of the season. But you can do that. And maybe some people are begging him to do more of that, to be more aggressive, to say, you know what, the defense can still bail you out. Try to win the game on offense. But yeah, the final score says it was a shootout. I think the bigger story is certainly going to be Bo Nix and the offense's performance. But I think you can't lose sight of how important the defense was in the Broncos winning that game. And this is a team that, without those interceptions yesterday, I think is probably, we're talking about a team that has forced the 3rd fewest turnovers in the league. It's not been something that they've done. Kind of like the offense and putting up big numbers like they did yesterday. Both sides of the football showed something that they hadn't shown before. But with all of this being through the lens of what do the Broncos need to do to make it to a Super Bowl, the offense being a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more explosive, I think is warranted. But I also think the defense is going to have to turn an opposing team over. I think they're going to have to come up with those kind of plays. It can't be, well, we're just going to have them settle for field goals. You got to take the ball away. And yesterday was a prime example of a game that the defense needed to take back for the offense to be able to do what it did. 719-247-1313. We'll continue on with this Monday edition of the show. Coming up next, Dylan Arocho, our athlete of the week from Harrison High School, joins me. Welcome back. Drive Time Sports here on Extra Sports 1300 with 51% of the fan vote. Dylan Arocho of Harrison High School is our athlete of the week. He scored 26 points and pulled down 10 rebounds in a win over Pueblo Centennial. The Panthers take on Cheyenne Mountain tonight. More on that in just a bit. First of all, Dylan, congratulations. Other than yourself, who will be the most happy that you are the athlete of the week?
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So who would be happy other than you? Who would be the happiest that you got this? Because there are a lot of people that voted for you, but I got to imagine a few of them would be more excited than anybody else that you won.
My whole family out Puerto Rico, everybody was going crazy in the boats and congratulating me.
Very cool. No, go ahead. What were you saying?
And then my dad too. My dad is a hooper, and then we hoop together and stuff. So he's always supporting me.
Can you beat your dad?
Can I what?
I said when you guys go up against each other, do you beat him?
It's hard, man. But he still got it. But yeah, I'm getting there.
Right on. And you said you got family in Puerto Rico. What part of Puerto Rico?
Half of my family is from Motuado, and then the other half from Isabela.
Oh, very, very cool. I was just out that way last year. I love it there. So you had a really nice start to the season, certainly, but you really popped in that game against Pueblo Centennial. What do you think was the reason for that?
I mean, the game before that one, I did a lot of mistakes, so I had to fix it up and be there for my teammates. You know what I'm saying? So I had to step up for the team and be a leader.
And what I notice about you this year so far, and I got to imagine this is just who you are as a basketball player, you're incredibly efficient shooting the basketball. You don't miss a lot of shots. How much of that do you attribute to skill that you have, and how much do you attribute to your basketball IQ and knowing, all right, this is a good shot that I'm going to take? Because, again, Dylan, you don't miss much.
Yeah, I really always try to take the most balanced shot. No, I don't be taking many contested shots unless we need it, like for game time or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm always ready in the corner for shoot or move it. If I don't got the shot, I'm covered, then move it back.
Yeah, and you can't do that. You can't have that mentality if you don't have trust in your teammates. How much do you trust the guys on the floor with you that either they'll get you the ball when you need it, or if you give them the ball, they'll be able to do their thing as well and still kind of move this forward and put points up on the board?
I feel like I can trust my teammates right now. We got a pretty nice team, and they know how we move and how everything is. So I think I can trust them pretty good.
Dylan Rocho, he plays basketball at Harrison High School. He is our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week. Joining me now. A lot of people sent in reasons why they voted for you. It's always interesting because I want to know, what people in your school or people in your family think about you. Two adjectives that kept coming up repeatedly when I went over these comments, Dylan, about you: disciplined, determined. So let me ask you, where does the discipline and where does the determination come from that apparently people notice about you more than anything else? Where does that come from?
I mean, our coach since freshman year, he's always been trying to get us to be disciplined and different than other coaches, Mm-hmm. He he's more like an old school coach. So we got used to that kind of play style. So we always try to be more disciplined and balanced with stuff.
Do you guys look at that as an advantage for you every night out, that you can say, you know what, even if our shot's not falling, even if this isn't working, we're ultimately going to be the more disciplined team out there on the floor, and that will go a long way to winning basketball games?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we always got to be disciplined to like win games.
And you guys have been disciplined, and you guys have been winning games. You guys are hot right now, but tonight you're playing another team that's in really good form so far early this season. That's Cheyenne Mountain. They're unbeaten right now. So let me ask you, Dylan, how do you see it as far as you guys moving your win streak up to 4 games and ending their 5-game winning streak? What's going to be the difference tonight, in your opinion?
Tonight, I feel like we all got to play hard and play defense because, yeah, like you said, that's a pretty solid team, and we all got to play together. Not be selfish and be there for each other. Play hard.
What do you think the ceiling is for? It's still early on in the season. I'm sure you guys are still getting a feel for one another. But what are some of those conversations like between you and your teammates about what is possible for this Harrison basketball team this year?
Yeah, we always be talking about how small we are because we really don't got like much height in our team. I'm one of the tallest kids in the team right now, so we're always talking about how we need to be quicker than the other team because we're small, so we're supposed to be more quicker, more athletic. So we got to take advantage of that and be more like strong, more aggressive, to win games and beat the other teams.
Well, and you guys have been doing that right now. Little hiccup to start the season, but you guys have put that well in the rearview mirror. You guys are playing great ball right now. And tonight, again, Harrison and Cheyenne Mountain at 7. That's going to be a huge game. So if you're a fan of ball, go out, check out Harrison and Cheyenne Mountain tonight. Of course, the Panthers will be led by Dylan Orocho, our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week. Dylan, congratulations on a very well-deserved honor, and best of luck tonight and moving forward for you guys.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
That
really
is
appreciate the Dylan Orocho, our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week from Harrison High School. And great to be able to talk to Dylan. That's kind of the other part of this program is I want to be able to have these athletes on the air and to be able to talk to them about what makes them such outstanding student athletes, but also give them a chance to further relish their moment. And so it was great to have Dylan on. Appreciate the folks, Randy and everyone at Harrison, for making that happen. There are 4 new nominees that you can vote on this week. If you have not seen on social media, I will tell them to you now. Dominic Lewis of St. Mary's, Kaylin Pope of Doherty, Wyatt Boley of Cheyenne Mountain, and Paisley Pogue of Discovery Canyon are your 4 nominees for the Extra Sports Athlete of the Week. You could go to extrasports1300.com to cast your vote. The winner will be revealed on Friday, and hopefully, like Dylan, they will be able to join me on the show Friday, or in this case, Monday. So I was glad we could get that worked out. One quick thought here before we hit the top of the hour, and we'll get more into the Broncos side of this because they're not immune. There are some questions about injuries going on with them, but the big injuries yesterday for the Green Bay Packers, Micah Parsons, the ACL, and I mean, I think I don't rule out the Green Bay Packers. I'm not going to say they're done because I thought that they were a Super Bowl contender. In fact, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl before they landed Micah Parsons. I still think they have the ability to do that. The good news for them, Christian Watson avoided a serious injury. He left that game late yesterday. But certainly you have to look with how the Bears have risen here and some of the other teams in the NFC, most notably the Rams, that either positioning or where you think Green Bay is going to end up might change a little bit here. I'm still going to back them. And yesterday, certainly that I don't know that there's a lot of criticism that goes to the Green Bay Packers. I don't know. I haven't listened to Green Bay Sports Talk Radio. Maybe they are dishing out plenty of blame, but I just think yesterday was a game between two really good football teams. And I still think Green Bay, even without Micah Parsons, is a really good football team. But certainly losing Parsons is a huge blow to them. And you could see wherever I wouldn't begrudge anybody to say, well, I thought they were going to be here with Parsons and now I got to move them down one. For me, I had them as the team coming out of the NFC before they even landed Micah Parsons. So I'm going to hang in there. I think that the Bears are a phenomenal story. Playoffs are a very different story in terms of their viability. The Rams are the Rams, but they're dealing with some injuries as well. I think as much as this is a blow to morale, maybe that's what it is more than anything else, a huge blow to morale to lose that game and to lose Micah Parsons in the process. But it looks like they'll get Christian Watson back, and I still think they got a chance. But do the Bears win the division? They might. Because the Packers are going to have to recalibrate a little bit, and they don't have a lot of time to do it while they're still trying to keep up with Chicago and win that division. So that was an unfortunate part of yesterday, certainly where the injuries that Green Bay sustained there. I don't think it changed the game. Broncos, the Surtain pick happened. The Broncos put up 20-plus points with Micah Parsons on the field. That's not what we're doing here. But for the Packers moving forward, those two injuries are certainly something to see how Green Bay will recover. 719-247-1313. When we come back, the Broncos say they want something, but I don't think they really want it. I'll tell you what it is next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Monday. We got Monday Night Football coming up at 5. It will be the Steelers and the Dolphins. Steelers, obviously, needing to keep pace with Baltimore, make sure that they don't slip. And then there are the Dolphins, who are putting together a very interesting, if nothing else, little string of games here. So it should be a pretty interesting one tonight. Again, our coverage from Westwood One starting at 5. So that means we have about an hour to accomplish what we would like to and what you would like to accomplish. 719-24-7. 1313 is the number to text or call in. Shout out to those of you watching on our social media platforms, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. The handle is the same in all of those places, no matter where you go, at XTRA Sports 1300. And you can always drop a comment there, and I will get to them over the course of the program. Broncos win again, beat the Green Bay Packers in a game that in many ways was a showcase game for the Denver Broncos. I think showcase because it was one of the best in the AFC versus one of the best in the NFC, but also because the Broncos showcased the ability to do some things that they haven't done a lot this season. Offensively, it was the explosive plays, it was the dynamism of that Broncos offense that we had not seen a lot this year. Or when we had seen it, we went, oh, but it's the Bengals. Oh, but it's the Cowboys. Oh, but it's the Giants. Now you have that, what they showed against one of the NFL's best. So that was a showcase game for the offense. Showcase for the defense, because this is a team that, as great as the defense has been all year, they haven't created a lot of turnovers. And they had to create turnovers in order to win that football game. Pat Surtain, with the play of the game, completely shifted the momentum and allowed the Denver Broncos to win that football game. And then you had Riley Moss popping up with an interception of his own. So I think the term showcase game applied in a lot of different ways to yesterday's game. And when you win the way that the Broncos did, when you show a side of yourself that you had not shown a lot, but you showed it to a national audience, because most everybody in that 2:00 window saw the Packers and the Broncos. The Broncos hope, maybe, that you're going to put some respect on their name. This is Garrett Bowles afterwards.
Pretty soon, the media, the news, whatever, maybe they start respecting us eventually. But you know what? The only people that we respect are the people in this building, the love that we have for our city, the fans, this organization, our owners. Man, we're just full of dogs. You know, George Payton and what he's done is created this team with SP. And just the love we have for one another, man. We believe in each other. If nobody else believes in us, it's all good, man. We believe in each other.
You know, every athlete says, and even Garrett Bowles did at the beginning of that clip, that they want the respect. And I think it's human nature to want respect from the outside, from your peers. I think it's a normal human emotion to crave that, to want that. But I think in sports, you want it, but I don't think that you actually do. You say you want it. You believe you want it. I don't think that you do. And I think with the Denver Broncos, I think it might be the worst thing for them to get universal respect, to be talked about like, I don't know, the Chiefs are talked about in previous years, right? That everyone has to give them their flowers. Everybody has to respect them. I don't think that's a good thing for the Denver Broncos. I think part of what we are seeing is a team that is using the fact that they aren't universally respected that there are games like yesterday where most everybody with a platform win against the Denver Broncos. I think it fuels them. I think it is part of the DNA of this team to thrive on the doubt. And I think Garrett Bowles, even through that clip, that 25-second clip, he started in a place of put some respect on our name and then ended with, actually, we're good. I think even the team understands that a catalyst to their success has been that despite the successes that they've had, 10-game, now an 11-game win streak, dethroning Kansas City at the top of the AFC, being the front runner for home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs, all of these things that the Broncos have done. And every time they have answered the bell, when the question is, can Bo Nix do this? He does it. Can the defense do this? Can they beat this team? Can they win in this situation? They keep answering the bell. It's 11 weeks. 12 if you include the bye, right? We're sitting here at 3 straight months of the Broncos doing nothing but winning. And yet, questions continue to be asked. And I said this last week. I don't think that yesterday is going to change a lot of people's minds. I think most people are set in their ways or set in their opinion of who this Broncos team is. But to echo Garrett Bowles' last sentiment there, I think it's a good thing. I think this is a team that is not better suited to be the front runner, to be the favorite. I think the sports books, perpetuated by the local media, did the Broncos a service by constantly bringing up throughout the week how Vegas had them as underdogs, which brought forth a great line from Bo Nix about, we don't really care. My mom thinks we're going to win. I think it's the best thing for them. I think they like to be considered scrappy underdogs. And you saw this play out before the game even started. The Broncos trying to, show that we're not going to be bullied. Like everyone thinks we're the underdogs. Well, we're going to, not metaphorically, because they were actually pushing the Green Bay Packers, but I think that was very intentional. That was very just short of orchestrated. Because that's their mentality. Their mentality is, you could disrespect us all you want, but we're not afraid of you. That's what that little pregame skirmish was. We're not afraid of the Green Bay Packers. You may think that, and you being odds makers, national media, local media, fans, whatever, whoever it might be, you think we are underdogs in our own building? Okay, well, we'll show the Packers we're ready for the fight. I think it's an endearing quality for a team to have. Fortunately or unfortunately, I think mostly fortunately, because it means that you're on to bigger and better things, that you've had so much success that it's undeniable that you have to respect it. It's a natural evolution. There will come a day, if the Broncos achieve everything they want to achieve, where they're going to have to, and the Nuggets and the Avalanche have both gone through this in recent years. Right? Once that target is painted on your back, it requires a different mentality. You can't sit and say everyone's downing us. No one's downing you. Everyone's praising you. Everyone's labeling you as the team to beat. And the Broncos should want to get to that point. But right now, they're not there. But I think it fuels them. I think it motivates them. As does the idea that they're chasing something greater than any one of these regular season games, whether it be against Kansas City or Green Bay or whoever it might be, they're chasing something greater, as Pat Surtain pointed out after the game.
I mean, we just kept talking about it the whole week, how big of a game this was. But we always say, man, we're going to play in bigger games down the road, down this stretch. And, we not a finished product at all. We still got a lot more work to do. And that's the scary part about it, going into this run. Going on to these last 3 games, going into the playoffs, man, I just feel like we still got a lot more work to do. And, we just correct some things. But, man, this team's going places, and I can feel that. So.
And you've heard Sean Payton say that on numerous occasions. We're going to play in bigger games. That's what he keeps saying. And you know that the culture that a coach is trying to instill is being instilled, that it's there when you hear Pat Surtain basically regurgitate what Sean Payton tells you. And Bo Nix is the poster child for this. Most weeks, you don't even have to hear from the other one. If you listen to Sean Payton, you know exactly what Bo Nix is going to say when he steps to the podium and vice versa. You know that when Bo Nix steps up there, that he's basically just telling you things that Sean Payton would have told you. This team is so bought in to what Sean Payton is telling them. And every week that goes by, and they win again and again and again, it just gets cemented and ingrained even more. They believe even more. They buy in even more. But to Pat Surtain's point, I think yesterday was one of those days where you can buy into the idea of, okay, maybe there is more. And I've said it, there's going to have to be. As much credit as I have given the Denver Broncos for almost perfecting this formula that they continue to use week in and week out to win football games, the playoffs is a different animal. The playoffs require, and how many unbelievable playoff performances do you recall? Right? The playoffs require you to be more than even you were during the regular season. And 2 things that you could probably look at with the Denver Broncos throughout most of the season and say you haven't seen is an explosive offense and a defense that creates turnovers. And what did you see yesterday against arguably the best team in the NFC? A more explosive offense and a defense that created turnovers. I think both of those things are going to be required at some point. Round 1, AFC Championship, Super Bowl, at some point, the Broncos are going to need an interception from Pat Surtain. They're going to need the offense to put up 28 points or more. They're going to need these things. And that's what yesterday was about, to make you think, you know what, and to make the Broncos think more than anything else. As much as they're bought in, what does Sean Payton say? Confidence comes from demonstrated ability. Yesterday is going to have this team bought in even more because it showed them in many ways that they're capable of everything great that they've done. They might be capable of even more. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Broncos win over the Packers. 719-247-1313 is the number if you'd like to get your thoughts in on the Broncos win over the Packers. Here's one. Couple of different thoughts. Says from the 719. That Pat Surtain pick was absolutely ridiculous, and yet again, why is he the defensive player of the year? Let me stop and answer that question. Because he had interceptions like that multiple times last year. In addition to the fact that any premier matchup that he had against one of the elite receivers in the NFL, he would pretty much win. And I said that interception yesterday reminded me of the interception he had that he returned for a touchdown against Vegas. Just in terms of the consequence of it, how big it was. That not only flipped that game, but flipped the Broncos' season in many ways. That pick yesterday didn't turn around the season by any means, but they don't win that game unless Pat Surtain makes that pick. But he seemed to make – there was a clutch factor with Pat Surtain last year that made him buck the normal trend of let's just give it to the guy with the most sacks. I still think that he deserved it, but forget him winning that award for a while. Because these voters, they'll deviate every once in a while from their regular behavior, but they're going to go right back to it for a while. And I would expect probably Myles Garrett to win Defensive Player of the Year because he will break Michael Strahan's single season sack record. So, second part, which I think is good as well. I still don't think that the Broncos will get the respect of the media or whatever. To me, it always feels like they have something to say in regards to the Broncos that is not positive or reasons on why they're going to get beat. And I think you're right, and that's why I said I could be proven wrong. We're only sitting on Monday. Obviously, the big national story is that Ding Dong, the witch is dead. The Chiefs are eliminated. And then obviously the injury to Patrick Mahomes, which apparently he avoided further damage to his knee. It is, I don't want to say just an ACL, but that's what it turned out to be, was just an ACL. It'll be interesting through the week. And this game coming up on Sunday is not a nothing game. The Jaguars are coming into Denver, and they are coming off a huge performance on Sunday. And they're thinking to themselves, if we beat the Broncos, we're only a game back. I mean, the margin is slim. They're going to have to try and thread the needle and expect or hope that the Broncos either lose to a Chiefs team led by Gardner Minshew or the Chargers in Week 18. But, this is a big game on Sunday. This is an important game. So as the week progresses, it'll be interesting to see if the tone changes. I thought going into it that most of what could potentially happen on Sunday would not change people's minds. And if you're a Broncos fan that's hoping that the national media starts to fall in love with your team as much as you're in love with them, that means it's probably not going to happen. I'll be curious because of the way the Broncos won. They didn't blow out the Packers. The Packers had them throughout half of the game, right? And if not for the Pat Surtain pick, we may be having a very different conversation today. But I would be curious because of the Broncos' ability to create turnovers, because of the explosive plays that the offense was able to hit, whether it does actually become a performance that gets the Broncos a little more love. But I also think part of this and we do this as fans, like we silo ourselves and we think that the way that our team is talked about, they cannot possibly talk about other teams this way. Right? That persecution complex that comes about, right, as fans. And it's just part of our normal behavior as sports fans. We think that we're being constantly attacked, or our team is being constantly attacked. Part of this with the Denver Broncos is just because they just got here. And I think people can acknowledge that in the NFL, the Broncos have not crossed a threshold to warrant universal admiration. Right? They've played one playoff game as currently constructed, and they got absolutely housed. This is how our current state of sports work. Okay? You have to do so much to finally garner the respect. And when you do, then people get carried away the other direction and start to say some crazy things that are positive about your team, right? When a team wins a championship, are they going to be a dynasty? Bo Nix wins a Super Bowl. Is he one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the league? Like, it's the natural progression here. It does take a lot, and the Avs and the Nuggets both had to earn this. I mean, just take Nikola Jokic. You know how long Nikola Jokic has been an elite basketball player. Right? How long did it take the prevailing belief throughout sports fans and sports media to acknowledge that he is one of the best players in the NBA? He won MVPs, and he still couldn't get that. Nuggets fans understand that struggle, that despite having a generational talent in Nikola Jokic that has won MVPs, they still don't seem to give enough love to Nikola Jokic. Now, that's not the case anymore. Although with Wemby's performance against OKC the other night, you know, we'll see if Jokic kind of goes by the wayside in some of the NBA conversations. But the Avs have been through this. The Nuggets have been through this. You have to do a lot. And every step of the way, no matter how much success you're having, until you win that ultimate prize, you're going to be doubted. So I think your second point is spot on there. I think the media, capital M, will continue to try and poke holes in the Denver Broncos. But I don't think it's done out of malice. I think it is done just because that is the nature, and being in sports media, I understand the nature of the business. Not that I'm at the highest level of it, but I understand it. It takes a lot to want to put yourself out there and say, oh, I'm all in on Denver. Like, you're putting your reputation on the line when you say something like that. So you're going to comb over every inch of that team to make sure, all right, if I'm going to open a microphone, if I'm going to go on camera and say, you know, Broncos Super Bowl favorites, I got to make sure I'm not leaving myself any room to fail here. But again, I don't think that the Broncos really want that. They may say they want it. I don't think they want it. The lack of respect is one of the biggest motivators of professional athletes. Being doubted is a huge motivator. And I think that the Broncos are better served continuing to be doubted for this season. We'll see where it goes, see what they achieve. And at some point, that paradigm is going to shift if the Broncos accomplish what they set out to accomplish. But right now, it serves them best to be doubted, to not get the respect that they claim they want and deserve. Follow up. Do you think that they don't get any respect from the media because of the manner in which they have performed this season and it was unexpected? I think, and that's why I'm so curious to see all the analysis this week on the Denver Broncos, because I do think you're spot on. The way that the Broncos have won football games. And at the beginning of the show, I liken them to UFC legend George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre's default fighting style was labeled as safe. And what does that safe become? Boring. And then you tend to gravitate towards the fighters in this case that are knocking guys out within the first 10 seconds of the first round and putting on more enjoyable performances. But yet George St. Pierre kept winning and winning and winning and winning. The way that the Broncos win games, that they want to win games, because they are built to win games a certain way on a consistent basis. Defensive oriented, run the football, not asking Bo Nix to do too much. Bo Nix, be safe out there. That kind of thought process. Absolutely it plays into it. Do you watch the Thursday night game against the Raiders? That was a boring game. So their style absolutely lends itself to the quote unquote lack of respect. Because they don't impress people. That's not how you impress people. You impress people by doing what Josh Allen did, well, yesterday, but certainly against the Bengals 2 weeks ago. Or what Trevor Lawrence did, even against the Jets. It's funny. I think in some ways, Trevor Lawrence will get more love for his 6 touchdown performance against a bad Jets team than Bo Nix will his 4 touchdown performance against an elite Green Bay team. Because our eyes are drawn to the kind of performances that Trevor Lawrence put up yesterday. The most impressive thing about the Denver Broncos is how consistent they are. That's the best thing about them. That week in and week out, you know what they want to do, yet they come out and do it effectively and win the game. That's the best thing about this team. But yet, you'll look at other teams that may go through a week or two where they're down, but their highs are really high. Buffalo's a great example of this. Kansas City at times is like this. Baltimore, where they can go through a little bit of a rough patch and can have some people kind of teetering a little bit. I don't know. And then all it takes is one huge performance, and then everyone's back in love with them. But shouldn't the Broncos' consistency be held up right alongside that? It should. It's not the way that we operate. But again, I don't think that the Broncos would want it any other way. If you gave them truth serum, I think they are just fine with being the underdogs this week against Green Bay. For everyone to be looking in Buffalo's direction or New England's direction, I think it suits them very well. 719-24-7-1313. More of your thoughts next. Well, it wasn't all positive for the Denver Broncos yesterday in their win over the Green Bay Packers. I mean, it was overwhelmingly positive, but 2 injuries to important players. One we know is quite bad. The other we don't know yet. The one that's quite bad is Brandon Jones. The injury that he sustained was a pectoral injury. And then the other was RJ Harvey, who injured his ribs. And I think that one, if he's going to miss time, is more consequential. And I think that the Denver Broncos told you as much with the move they made today. So with placing Brandon Jones on IR, and that's a tough loss. Like, Hufanga has been the better of the 2 safeties, but Brandon Jones has been good, right? They placed him on IR. They didn't place RJ Harvey on IR, so that's positive sign number 1. But they told you where their minds are when they picked up Cody Schrager off of waivers from Houston. They brought in a running back rather than another safety. So could you read into it and say that they fear for RJ Harvey's health moving forward? Maybe. I just think I think right now it's precautionary. Hey, we can't wait. We got to get somebody in here just to see. But I also think it tells you that at the safety position, they feel like they're good. And PJ Locke filled in yesterday. You wouldn't know, with all due respect to Brandon Jones, that he wasn't out there the way that the Broncos defense played after the Surtain pick. But I think that tells you where the Broncos are more concerned. If they thought that losing Brandon Jones would be incredibly detrimental to them, or they didn't have the appropriate depth, they would have signed a safety. The fact that they're bringing in Schrader, who you recall was a little bit almost Scattaboo light at Missouri, like he got some of that, the treatment that Scattaboo got at Arizona State. Schrader got some of that at Missouri. You know, he's being talked about as a Heisman candidate at one point, almost like a cult figure in many ways. And then he got to the NFL and it just hasn't worked out for the guy. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Schrader is, if RJ Harvey's out, that Schrader will do just fine. No. If RJ Harvey's out, that's a problem. And RJ Harvey's done a tremendous job, and the Broncos, by extension, have done a tremendous job to make you miss J.K. Dobbins less. That first go of it against Washington left something to be desired, but RJ Harvey ran the ball incredibly well against the Raiders, and I thought he ran the ball well against the Packers, which was a bigger test, in all honesty. So you just ramp up RJ Harvey, and if you're a Broncos fan, you're feeling like, okay, not having J.K. Dobbins, not that RJ Harvey's better at this point, but clearly the Broncos can figure it out. Now, if RJ Harvey is out for a long time, and the fact that he wasn't placed on IR, you could really take either way. You could either say that's a positive sign, or you could say they never placed Dre Greenlaw on injured reserve till, week 4? They didn't put Pat Surtain on IR, but he ended up missing 3 games. But they did place Brandon Jones on IR. So again, you could take it either way. We'll find out as the week progresses how RJ Harvey is doing. That is the injury that should be more concerning to you if you're a Broncos fan. And the Broncos are telling you that by making the roster move they did today to bring in a running back rather than a safety to put in for Brandon Jones. But I think the run game, the system that the Broncos have in place and the offensive line, because don't forget, now they're going to get back Ben Powers. Mike McGlinchey was questionable. He ended up playing yesterday. The Broncos running game system, if you will, should give you a little bit of confidence, but you can only go so far down the depth chart till it doesn't matter, right? Even the 49ers got to a point when Christian McCaffrey was dealing with injuries, and then the next guy got hurt, and then the next guy got hurt. At some point, you get there and say, even with a very good system in place, we've just lost too much talent that we're not as effective. And the Broncos could be flirting with that if RJ Harvey is out for an extended period of time. But no update on that. Brandon Jones on IR with the pectoral injury. I think PJ Locke will just be playing with Hufanga back there the rest of the way. The Bo Nix of it all yesterday, more than 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Did he show another gear for this Broncos team that maybe was it a moment in Bo Nix's development that we look back and say Bo Nix became this because of that Packers game? Here's Sean Payton mixing in some metaphors when talking about the development of his quarterback.
Look, I can only compare it to like running a half marathon once the year I was suspended, and it was in Las Vegas. And so every mile they had a band and Gatorade, right? And then I think it's 13.3 miles. Well, you train for that, but you never run 3.3 miles. So I think he's like at mile marker 4, taking the Gatorade. They give you the goo at mile marker 9, and that was like rocket fuel. It was needed. But I think, look, early in the process and in improving, and the thing about him is like, he loves playing, and so that's contagious.
The goo. You ever had the goo? I've never had the goo. But then again, I have never ran a half marathon. Even when Sean Payton brings up the fact that he was suspended for that year, he's still kind of bragging. So I was suspended for a year, but guess what I did with my time? I ran a half marathon. What did you do with your life? Came off like a humble brag a little bit. Like my great shame of my coaching career, but yet I turned it into a positive because I ran a half marathon. Respectfully, I think we're beyond mile marker 4 with Bo Nix. I think if you're saying in a 13.3 mile race that Bo Nix has run 4 miles, no, I don't think so. Because that would go against who Bo Nix is. The whole idea is he's played high-level football more games than anybody in the history of college football. I think we're further along. But then again, we're almost up on the end of year 2. Yeah, I think we're further along than that. Or miles 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are going to be completed rapidly through the next few weeks. Now everyone's going to be wondering where that 9th mile is. What is that? The Super Bowl? Is that mile 9 for Bo Nix? I think what he showed yesterday is that when it is required, he can elevate and almost look like a different quarterback. Right? And you've seen Bo Nix play pretty much every game, right? Didn't he look different? I mean, he was using his legs. We've talked about that, how important that is to Bo Nix's game. but his accuracy downfield, and I wondered this out of the Kansas City game. It was my big question about Bo Nix after the Kansas City game. Is that accuracy downfield and on deep passes, is that real? Now we're talking about Bo Nix making accurate downfield passes 2 out of the last 3 weeks. At what point does it become a trend? Because against Kansas City, it was largely an outlier. Especially when you compared it to the form he was in going into the Kansas City game. There was regression. His numbers were going down. And in Kansas City, against Kansas City, I should say, he hits a few big-time downfield passes. And that's what I was wondering. Okay, is this like a thing? And then you didn't really see it after that. So I think where I land is I don't think Bo Nix is somebody, and I don't know how many quarterbacks in the league can you book 300 yards and 4 touchdowns every time out, but you know the class of quarterback I'm talking about. You know some of those names. Making a comparison to Josh Allen. Let's start there. I don't think Bo Nix is going to consistently be able to match Josh Allen's output. I don't think he's capable of that on as consistent of a basis as Josh Allen is. Lamar Jackson is another one, right? That will put up some pretty eye-popping numbers. I don't think Bo Nix is that. But what he has shown the ability to do is to, I don't want to say raise and lower his game, but adjust his game and his performance to whatever is required on that particular game. There's a reason why the Broncos win most of their games the way they do. That's their identity. That's the way Sean Payton wants to play. But what you can take, be heartened about if you're a Broncos fan is like, look, more was required than that. They couldn't win yesterday's game following the same formula they seem to follow so many weeks. And yet Bo Nix was up to the challenge. So on a one-off basis, or in this case, when you're looping in the Kansas City game, 2 out of every 3 or 4 games, is Bo Nix at least that consistent? Maybe. And I think there will be a playoff game where that is required. But what this speaks to for Bo Nix, for putting aside his physical ability, I think you have seen, whether it's these close, ugly wins or the close, pretty wins like yesterday, I think what you're seeing is a quarterback that has a knack for rising to the occasion. And sometimes that's not enough. Josh Allen, to talk about him one more time, is a great example of that. How many of the Buffalo Bills' losses in the playoffs can be really pinned on Josh Allen? He, time and time again, is everything that the Bills need him to be, and yet most of the time it still is not good enough. So that could be the case for the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix can raise his game to the level you saw him at yesterday, and it still might not be enough. But you have a quarterback that has put in a couple of performances lately that you go, well, more than that, because you talk about his fourth quarters. This is a guy that can elevate his game if necessary. I don't think he's 304 touchdowns every week from here on out. But if the occasion calls for it, just like by extension the entire Broncos team showed yesterday, if the occasion calls for it, they can take their game to another level. They can be a little bit more than what maybe you see on a regular basis. And that is the mark of a really good football team. Is the ability to do more if more is required. We'll have to leave it there for today. Got Monday Night Football coming up in a few minutes. Appreciate your patronage and your interaction. Rest of the week, I'll just be upfront with you and honest, as I always am. Going to be a little bit tricky traveling to Utah for women's basketball. Going to try everything in my power to make sure that we get as many shows in this week as possible, but we'll see. So, but regardless, appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully I'll talk to you many more times throughout the week. Coming up next, Monday Night Football, Dolphins and Steelers here on Extra Sports 1300.